Right. So as I mentioned earlier, right, that we could have, instead of gone the decorator pattern or the strategy pattern, we could have instead chosen to go the inheritance way, right, where we have a class that implements some native or some really small behavior, right, and that could perhaps provide some abstract methods that could then be re-implemented by additional children that inherit from this base class, and then each additional child could write its method in terms of a super method, yes, where you first try your super method, and depending on the return of that super method, then you add additional behavior. Says, well, if that didn't work, then I'm gonna go my other route, right? And now the choose move would be an abstract method that subsequent derived classes would override, right? Adding additional behavior or adding additional implementation to that would be ever more sophisticated. We could have gone that route, and that certainly would have worked. Yes, that certainly would have worked, but we would be stuck, right, by that one chain of inheritance. Right? If we wanted to somehow recombine it into some other way, right, there's no way to dynamically choose an inheritance, a different inheritance chain. Yes, we're stuck at compile time. The accumulation of multiple behaviors, as opposed to being able to dynamically choose which way we wanted to go. Right, we are fixed. Right, at compile time of how these inherit from one another, as opposed to being able to do this at runtime, that we can choose instead use the delegate pattern to dynamically choose, mix and match the various strategies that we can choose at runtime. Also, because they are self-contained, right? Notice that each one of these functions, they're not dependent on each other. They don't know anything about one another. Yes, right. So you could independently test them, right, without having to have any care about any superclass or any dependency with other classes. Yes, you could totally test out the block strategy, regardless whether you knew you had any other strategies. Yes, all by itself. You can test the block strategy all by itself, the win strategy all by itself, right? The corner strategy all by itself, as opposed to, if these were inheriting from one another, right? Well, classes that were lower in the inheritance chain were certainly inheriting from their parent, right? So you could not test it individually, right, without regard of whatever behavior is inheriting from anyone else in that chain of inheritance. Yes. So the testing of using the inheritance would be much more complicated than testing using the strategy pattern or the decorator pattern, right? Because you would have this cross-class dependence between them, right? Yeah. So they're tiny, right? They're self-contained. They're easily to read independently of anyone else, right? So again, they're very focused on doing one thing and one thing only very well, right? So there's a lot of cohesion within the implementation of that class, right? That class only does that, and it could care less about anything else outside its boundaries.